Night had folded the city into a soft, bristling darkness, the glass and chrome of towers turning into a constellation of human lives. In one narrow throat of an alley behind a high-end hotel, rain made silver veins across a cardboard shelter. Beneath quilts of newspaper and thrift store blankets lay Gabriel Voss, handsome in the unassuming, acclimated to hardship way people learn to be beautiful after losing everything. His hair was a dark wave that kept falling into his eyes, his face sharp as a coin left in a dryer too long, and his laugh when it came was unexpectedly bright. He had been homeless for 2 years since the betrayal that had uprooted him, since Celine, the woman he had loved and shared a small, difficult apartment with, had left with the money they'd saved together and the rest of his pride, choosing a life of convenience over the messy, mutual hope they'd once kept on a shelf. Gabriel had not expected mercy. He'd expected indifference. He'd trained himself to read faces, to find the soft spots where people's hardness had gaps, hungry men, hurried couriers, exhausted nurses returning shift by shift to their lives. He survived by paying attention. What he never expected was to become a force for someone else's security, let alone to be mistaken for a threat. The alley emptied into a fountained plaza where people came and went dressed in the evening gloss of success and fatigued enjoyment. She arrived like a sudden chord, tall, every line of her body deliberate luxury. Her name, Elena Moro, belonged on the covers of magazines that ran columns on power and beauty. Her hair was the color of old champagne, her coat tasted of expensive wool. She moved with the assured grace of someone who had never known hunger that lasted beyond the clocks of her household. That night she was alone, walking with a purposeful tread toward the hotel entrance, a slender clutch tucked under her arm. She was distracted, phone held close, face lit by an argument happening within little glass rectangles. She didn't notice the two men step from shadow to shadow, their hands switching from pockets to menace. They were small-time dogs, daring anything larger than they were to look away. "Nice purse," the taller one mumbled, and the rest happened with the compulsion of scripts practiced and never rehearsed. "Hey, give," Elena snapped. Her voice had the command of someone used to getting what she wanted. The first thief lunged. The second pulled away her phone. In a second, the crowd's warmth soured into a ring of witnesses and hands intended for help, but frozen by the social cost of action. Most people saw a rich woman being robbed and turned their eyes away faster than they turned their heads toward an accident. They saw two men against one, and calculations about liability and involvement were made and laid aside like crumbs. Gabriel was in the doorway of a bodega, watching the world with a memory that never moved far from caution. He had seen robberies before, he had been robbed too. That wasn't what made him cross the plaza. It was the quick, instinctive recognition of danger when a woman could not defend herself, not because she was fragile, but because she had been surprised. He moved. His approach was casual, the kind of stride that spoke of someone who belonged nowhere but knew it all. Perhaps his sudden appearance startled the thieves more than his force did. He didn't try to reason. He moved with the calm certainty of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The taller thief turned to him, more prepared to fight than to think. Gabriel's hand closed on the man's wrist. His other hand took hold of the second thief's jacket. Nobody expected grace from a homeless man. They expected rapacity, the unmoored hate of a man with nothing. Instead, they met a quick, precise movement that disarmed clumsy aggression. There was a flash, a shove, the wrong angle, and the taller thief slipped, striking his head on the fountain's granite rim with a muffled crunch. He rolled, a motion that looked terrible and final, and people gasped. The second thief cursed, pushed Gabriel, and fled. Gabriel steadied himself, breathing hard, as Elena's phone clattered against a paving stone and flashed a stray screen at him. She was on the ground, disoriented, the rich fabric of her coat damp with fountain spray. Someone called an ambulance. Someone else called security. When Elena blinked herself awake, she looked up into a world that had rearranged itself around her. A security guard had arrived, broad-shouldered and armored with authority, a person appointed to ensure the safety of the affluent, the hired muscle of the plaza. He had seen the man at Gabriel's side and had leapt to a conclusion like a dive. The guard had seen the disheveled clothes, the stolen phone but absent pocket, the thieves gone, and he did what his training bred into him. He assumed crime, he protected the property. He did not see the exchange of holds, the thief's fall, the man's offered hand to the fallen woman. "You," the guard barked at Gabriel, "hands behind your back." Elena, in a fog of adrenaline and confusion, spoke first. He helped me. He stopped them." The guard did not hear nuance. He had seen an unconscious woman, a shuffled phone, and a man whose life was not built on contracts or respectable addresses. He assumed the easiest truth. He moved like a blunt instrument toward Gabriel, a baton making quick justice. The guard's knee drove Gabriel to the ground before the first sentence finished in Elena's mouth. The world narrowed to the noise of boots, the guard's muttered orders, the distant sound of the fountain. Gabriel tried to explain. "I stopped them," he said between his teeth, voice calm with a fatigue that had the ring of certainty. "She's—" The guard's knee found his ribs. Pain lit through Gabriel, white and clean. For a moment, decomposed personality resurfaced. The man who had once tried to smooth negotiations with a real estate broker, the one who had designed a marketing pitch now swallowed raw by his body protesting. He tasted iron and rain, but beneath the pain was the steady, stubborn beat of a heart that refused to stop. Elena reached out, fingers trembling, and touched his wrist as if to anchor him. She had the power to stop them, to force the guard's hand back with her title or a phone call. But right now, the scene belonged to people trained to believe appearances, and that belief was not in her favor. The ambulance and the police arrived in a tangle of lights. Statements were given, hastily taken, recorded with the automatic trust that the uniform supplied to the words of security. No one apologized. No one saw the way the guard had used his knee. By the time Elena was stable, Gabriel's face was raw with the memory of leather and solace. He let her go when the crowd pushed them apart, when the hotel staff ushered its guest into the warmth of the lobby, where the world smelled of citrus and the air tasted like cash. Her hand brushed his as she passed. For the first time in months, Gabriel felt a loneliness that was not his own, an interruption of the practiced resignation that had become his armor. He tried to speak to her as she disappeared behind glass and velvet ropes. Elena's eyes found his, and the look that passed between them was complicated enough to set a small storm moving, gratitude mixed with something else, curiosity, recognition, the dawning realization that this man who had been beaten for helping her might have a story worth hearing. She wanted to reach back, but business pulled at her like tide. The guard had his story, the hotel had surveillance footage, and the world arranged itself around the safe narratives. Gabriel left as the rain lightened to a fine mist. He wandered back to his alley, patched his wounds with the practiced economy of a man who had learned to make sores invisible, and thought about what had happened. He thought of Celine, of the way she'd smiled when the faucet tilts, of the small betrayals that had become the wedge between them. Those memories throbbed in his ribs where the guard's knee had landed. The neighborhood around him hummed, a mix of night shifts, kitchen exhaust, and the occasional late-night laughter of people living either comfortably or wonderfully oblivious. He slept, he always managed sleep, an economy of exhaustion. But before the sleep crept over him, someone watched him from the shadowed curve of the alley, an old man in a coat that had seen better winters, who had watched Gabriel move with that specific, small decency. The man's eyes were a pale, almost luminous gray that suggested more than a life's worth of seeing. He stepped into the dim. "You did well tonight," the old man said. His voice was dry, like a cupboard where time kept its spices. He wasn't one for displays. He had seen little good things get trampled because appearances were easier to read than the truth. He had come to the alley because he liked to watch when a city trembled and then righted itself. Gabriel rubbed at his jaw, wary. "Why?" "Because you helped a woman," the man said simply. "Because kindness is an endangered currency and you spent it freely." Gabriel shrugged. He'd been told he was generous and naive before. It had not worked in his favor. "I don't expect anything. You should go." The old man smiled in a way that suggested he had been waiting for that answer. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small and smooth, a pendant shaped like an open eye. It was nothing like the gaudy charms people bought for luck. It was simple, carved in dark wood and silver. "You expect nothing because you have been given little reason. That can be changed." Gabriel laughed, the wrong kind of wet, brittle laugh that does not reach the eyes. "You got the wrong guy." No, the old man's voice hardened, not from anger, but from a kind of patient insistence. I've been watching cities long enough to know the difference between a man who will take and a man who will give. I can offer, he stopped, as if deciding how much to risk. I can offer a gift. Gabriel's eyes narrowed in the way people did when a pitch was being made. A gift, from you, you a wizard now. The old man's eyes were amused. He had been called worse. I don't do spells, I give sight. I can let you see what a person carries inside, their hidden problems and the way to fix them. Not just secrets or the petty, but the real knot, what they need, what's stopping them. You can see it, and if you choose, you can help. But you cannot undo what was done to you, and you cannot use it for selfish gain or for harming others. Gabriel thought he heard the alley exhale. Someone who watched like the old man did rarely offered such a thing without a heavy price. What's the catch? No catch, the man said. Rules. You will not know more about yourself than you can bear. You will see when you look, a flash of the thing that is wrong, and then an image of what will fix it. You will not be the only help in their lives. You will be a nudge, a kindness in the right direction. You will be tested. Use it for kindness, or it will scorch your hands. Gabriel let the pendant rest in his palm. It was unexpectedly warm. He thought of Celine, of that clean betrayal. He thought of the endless small indignities of life on the street. He thought of the guard's knee and Alina's fingers on his wrist. Why me? Because you have not hardened, the old man replied. You have been beaten, yes, but your reflex is not revenge. The city needs people like you. Gabriel swallowed. Part of him wanted to refuse on principle. Part of him wanted to test if the universe had finally grown generous. He slipped the pendant over his head. It settled like a small weight at the base of his throat. He expected nothing to happen at first, then he blinked, and the world rewove itself. At first it was subtle. The man in the doorway across from him looked not like a random passerby, but like someone with a permanent ache in his knee and the need for a cane. The bartender down the street had a problem engraved across his eyes, debts, and an unpaid electric bill glowing like a small neon strip across his chest. It was like staring at people's weather. Then when he turned toward the old man to ask if it was real, Gabriel read the old man's face and saw, like a flash, the remedy, a safe place for his memories, a heavy box of photographs, and a promise to tell 3 chosen stories once a month to the children in the neighborhood. Gabriel felt dizzy with the responsibility and the possibility. Use it, the old man said, and remember, solutions must be gentle. People's lives are not puzzles to be solved for your ego. Gabriel sat there with the pendant warm against his throat while the city made its usual arrangements around hunger and business. He did not know how to be grateful for something that felt like infidelity. He did not know if the gift, if it was a gift, could fix what had been done to him. But he slept that night with an odd, fragile hope, a feeling that maybe the world could be eased by one honest pair of hands. The changes were not immediate or miraculous. Gabriel made mistakes at first. He would see a problem, like a woman in a laundromat with a red flash over her bills, and act with the bluntness of someone who had been given a toy without instructions. He would drop a stack of flyers offering job help into the laundromat, and the woman would look at him like he had offered charity without dignity. He learned quickly that seeing a solution wasn't the same as persuading a person to accept it. He had to learn to listen, to bend his pride into small kindnesses that did not announce themselves as charity. A phone number tucked into a jacket, a hot meal left at a door, quiet decisions. Word of Gabriel's interventions threaded its way through the city like a soft rumor. It began with the obvious, a stranger who had once stopped a robbery and gone away without a fuss. Elena read it with a curiosity that grew into something else. She had found her voice again about the man, what he'd done, how he'd been treated. Inside her, gratitude and a stubborn sense of not leaving things unresolved kept pressing. She wanted to find him because the world felt righted in a way that had not happened since she'd been a girl and someone had given her back a lost toy. She searched social channels, asked friends, and used the hotel's surveillance footage. She was the kind of woman who could find tea at 100 tables at once. When she finally tracked Gabriel down, she expected to find a beneficiary of pity, an embarrassed man, ashamed and defenseless. Instead, she found a man with a small light in him that surprised her. His jaw had a stubborn set to it, and there was an intelligence in his eyes that did not ask for permission to be there. He wore the pendant like an understated talisman. He had an air about him that said he had been both broken and learning to be useful. Elena, Gabriel said, when she approached him outside a bakery where he helped a young mother with a stroller. He did not step back from her polished skirts and the smell of perfume. He had been humiliated once by the world's assumptions and found the resilience to stand through it. Elena, she answered softly. She had come with an apology, or at least with an admission, that she had let the guard's story prevail. She had spoken to people at the hotel, they had been corrective, but she wanted something truer. I couldn't stop thinking about you, about how you were treated. Gabriel's mouth tightened. He had never let anyone help him before unless he had asked. He detected in her an earnestness that had been born of guilt and compassion, and a woman who wanted to make right in ways she was too used to buying. You don't have to do anything, he said. He did not want to be the object of her pity. I don't want to do anything to you without asking. Her eyes were sincere. I want to take you someplace warm, buy you a coat. I want to know you. There was a long pause between them in which the city did its soft impatience. Gabriel felt the pendant burn against his throat, a steady pulse that encouraged him to see more clearly, to understand what inside her something needed more than pity, a real conversation, a place beyond cliché. He looked at her and he saw, in the small quick flashes the pendant gave, a man who had lost the center of his life to an absence, who was searching for something more than the superficial honors that decorated her life. He saw, too, how the problem could be eased. Elena's team needed someone to manage a charity initiative, someone with genuine empathy to bridge the corporate veneers and the real people who needed help. She had the resources and the reach, but she lacked the bridge. Gabriel could be that bridge, and in being that, he could find a place that did not require him to pretend to be someone else. Elena invited him to dinner not as an offer but as an opening. She listened when he spoke, genuinely. She did not lower her voice when he told stories of sleeping under stars made less pretty by the city's sodium lamps. She did not ask him to dress like her world. She asked him about his skills, his plans, the small ways he had learned to survive. For the first time in a while, Gabriel felt the gnawing of loneliness become an edge, not a chasm. They fell into an awkward, honest courtship, one that slid between her world of gallery openings and board meetings and his world of soup kitchens and sleeping in shifts. He taught her how to listen without fixing. She taught him how to trust a world that often smelled of salon and power. The city watched them with its usual interest in novelty. People in Elena's circle murmured warnings about appearances. Gabriel's few friends, other men who had learned the language of survival, were wary of the expensive places he found himself in. He had to translate. He had to live in both spheres without losing himself. The biggest test came from an even older, more brutal source of judgment: family. Gabriel had family in the blurred, complicated way people with fractured pasts do. His sister, Mara, had kept a door open for him even when the ruthlessness had dulled his charm. She had married young, had children, and ran a small printing shop that folded flyers for local events. But the whisperers in Gabriel's life were many. Cousins who still refused to look him in the eye, his aged mother who kept saying, "We'll get by," as if that phrase could be a ladder. When he began spending more time with Elena, the differences were not just superficial, they were seismic. For them, Elena was someone whose life could either be a safe harbor or the kind of danger that made class barriers feel treacherous. They worried she might take him back into a world that would swallow him like a current. For Elena, they worried about her reputation, about the way her name would be slackened in social rooms if she took a homeless man as a status project. He invited them all to the small table at Mara's shop for an awkward dinner. Elena came modestly dressed, avoiding the jewelry that might make them feel that she was placing him under her thumb. Gabriel felt the pendant tick against his collarbone like a metronome, steady in its insistence. He looked at his mother's eyes and the skeptical glances of cousins and felt the tautness of his new life. He had offered Elena as not a savior but a partner. That meant she would not wear the badge of pity, and it also meant he could not lie about who he had been. At first the family's reaction was predictably defensive. They envied the access Elena had to money and assumed she would clean up Gabriel in a way that erased his edges. They worried she might be a social climber with a hidden agenda. Gabriel felt the shame flare as if returned to him recently from a cold mountain. He had not wanted to be pitied. his family's disapproval strung because it connected directly to his old wound, Celine, whose betrayal had been part of him losing his footing. Gabriel had believed that love would be either a place of mutual rescue or nothing at all. His family's concern added a third option he had not been ready for: compromise with the world's uglier doctrines. The pendant, however, taught him something crucial. Seeing a problem did not mean the solution required confrontation. He could not force his family to change their minds with explanations. He could not make Alina's actions read kindly to those who watched only for pain, but he could apply the gift to the knots they carried. He would see what was wrong and the small, precise acts that would untie it. He looked at Mara and saw vivid flashes: a printing press that was about to break down due to budget cuts, customers delinquent, a lease that would not be renewed without new accounts. He saw small solutions. Alina's contacts could open a steady order for local, socially responsible flyers. A small grant could pay for new rollers and keep the shop running. Gabriel recognized in his mother's face a worry anchored in medical bills and the refusal to be a burden. A way to ease it was to connect her to a community health program Alina's philanthropy could fund, guaranteeing appointments and lower costs. And there was his uncle, always tight-lipped, who had once owned a small carpentry business before the economy had swallowed him. The pendant showed a single image: a school that needed a carpenter's touch to restore damaged furniture and fix classroom doors. The uncle's skills could be respected again if the job was made regular and dignified rather than framed as charity. Gabriel, always practiced in small translations, spoke quietly with Alina. He did not tell her to buy his family's acceptance. He asked her to invest in the people whose hands had raised him, offering contracts to those who needed steady hours, not glossy press releases. Alina agreed easily. Her philanthropic office, at Gabriel's suggestion, launched a program called Second Hands, a dignified initiative to provide business contracts, small grants, and apprenticeship positions to people from marginalized communities. The press release focused on empowerment language and the program's sustainability model, but in private, Alina worked to make sure the program treated people as adults with dignity. Her team negotiated with the printing shop's landlord and secured the lease renewal for a reduced rate if the shop would take on printing work for the initiative. The change was not instantaneous. People's suspicions thinned slowly, not like mists cleared by sun, but like old paint being sanded.